about to share our entire design and setup process with you in about 10 minutes.
Maybe. We're not very good at judging our time. I think it'll be around 10 minutes.
We'll see.
Time's up.
This video is for 3 types of people.
Either you're the type of person who wants to start to get paid to design and set up short-term rental properties for clients.
Or you want someone to do the design and setup work for you, but you just want to understand the process a little bit more.
Or maybe you just want to pick up a few tips and tricks to make your next setup process a little more seamless.
If you fall into one of these categories, make sure to subscribe because this is part 1 of a setup series.
We'll be taking you behind the scenes from contract all the way to listing launch as we set up a new property in Palm Springs for our clients Josh and Whitney.
This may seem like a daunting and very involved process, but if we've learned anything in the dozens of setups that we have done, it's that doing your planning in advance can really make the process a lot smoother when it comes to implementation.
We've also learned how important it is to set very clear expectations on how the process goes, what the client can expect from you and when, and vice versa.
Step number 1 in our design and setup services process is the service contract.
So we found a general interior design contract online years ago and then just tweaked it to our needs.
We're not in the business of sharing legal advice, so we're just letting you know what we do.
Most of our contract looks like a standard contract that an interior designer would use when doing a project for a client. So it has sections for the description of services, confidentiality, rights of use, etc.
There are a few specific areas that we edited or added, and mostly they're to do with payment terms.
Our process has evolved over time, but now we collect a non-refundable deposit before we even start working on the proposal.
These proposals are very detailed and they take a lot of time.
We're picking out and sourcing every single item that's going to be going in the house down to the smallest details.
We do it this way to keep the timeline really tight because once we get approval of the proposal, then we can hit the ground running with purchases and do the install and get the property online as soon as possible.
It also keeps our budget more accurate.
What is the budget?
We then collect 50% of the design and setup fee, less that initial deposit once the proposal is approved.
Pretty self-explanatory. We collect half before we actually start implementation, and then we collect the other half after everything is done.
We also specify that midway through the project implementation, we are able to ask for a reimbursement of funds for purchases that we've made up to that point.
We never carry any credit card balances, and when you're purchasing for a whole home, it could be 10, 20,000 or more, and we don't like to tie up our own cash until a setup is completed.
This is not as big of a deal as it was now that we're running everything through our business, but when we were first getting started in setting up properties for clients, we were using our personal credit cards to finance everything.
Yeah, and when money is tight, this can be a big deal. So don't be a bank for other people. Make sure you have a way to get reimbursed quickly.
We have done setups in the past where we've used a client's credit card. They've given us all the credit card information, and then we've used that info to make purchases on their behalf online, and we're generally okay with that. It's our favorite thing.
Yeah, it can be a pain because you're rattling off a bunch of purchases at once, and oftentimes you'll trigger fraud alerts on the card, and then you got to contact the owner and get them to approve the transaction. It's just extra steps.
There are also always going to be some purchases that we make in store, like towels from Costco, things like that.
Another thing we like to include is a timeline. This is what a standard timeline will look like with our contracts.
It says first, designer and client sign service contract. Second, client pays designer a non-refundable deposit of X amount to begin the proposal process.
This fee will vary depending on the scope of work, but this is basically there to protect our time should we do the proposal and then the client decide to do the setup themselves or whatever other reason.
So what we charge for this is generally what we would be okay with if the client then took our mood boards and our design and decided to do it themselves and not pay us for it. They wouldn't get the product link, so they wouldn't have all of the details. They would just have like the look, but it would still sting if someone did that.
Yeah, wouldn't be really happy about it, but at least we'd have something for that effort.
That hurt my feelings. Hurt my feelings.
So back to the timeline. Third, designer provides detailed design and setup proposal to client, including mood boards and estimated costs.
Fourth, client approval of design and setup proposal. 50% of setup fee to be paid by client to designer at this point.
Fifth, designer begins sourcing and purchasing materials. Designer may ask client for reimbursement of purchased materials midway through project completion.
Sixth, designer will begin on-site design and setup services.
And seventh, upon completion of setup services, designer will provide client client with an invoice for the balance owed. So that's the timeline.
Then once that's all together, we'll input the client's details and send it to them for e-signature.
We happen to use Adobe eSign, but you could also use DocuSign or whatever sort of electronic signature service you prefer.
Once both parties have signed the service contract, then it's time to get to work on step 2, which is the design proposal.
We've shared in a previous video how we like to use Canva to create our mood boards and design proposals, and we'll link that video at the end of this one. But when it comes to creating a design proposal for a client, we have 2 main goals in mind.
First is to give the client an idea of the design direction we're going to head with the project.
That's where the mood boards come in. We create one for each room, and on those we're showing most, if not all, of the products that we're going to be purchasing for that space.
And it's put together in such a way that a client will have a pretty good understanding of what the space is going to look like when it's finished.
And the second goal is to give them a very accurate cost proposal.
There are things that always come up during the setup, and there are prices that are going to fluctuate from the time that we initiated the proposal to when we actually make the purchases.
Amazon items pricing fluctuates a lot, things go on sale.
Wayfair items also have a tendency to go out of stock quickly, and then we're going to have to look for a replacement that may be a different price point.
So while I'm creating this proposal in Canva, I'm simultaneously working on a spreadsheet where I'm tracking pricing and including links to every item.
And that means every single item, from beds to mattress protectors to the artwork hanging on the wall.
And one little tip, when you're going through this process yourself, make sure you go all the way through to checkout, especially if you're doing large items, because they may have shipping charges tacked on. You want to make sure that's included in your budget.
It's going to cost you a fortune to ship all this.
But the spreadsheet's great, and this way, when we do have client approval, we can just click through line by line, add it to the cart, and check out.
Since we've been through this process so many times, we already have all the basics linked in our spreadsheet, but we always go through, double check pricing, and add other specific items that we're going to do in the setup.
I'm not using the exact same pillow or same, couch for everyone. We're going to be linking a lot of resources in the description box of this video, including our free sample inventory, so you can check it out there, or you can go to arrivals.com/inventory.
Here's a basic outline of what goes into the design proposal.
First, there's a cover page with the client's name and a photo of the house or one of the rooms in the house. At least that's typically what I do for Josh and Whitney. They did a major renovation on this house, and we happened to be out of state when they had everything finished, so I didn't have any finished photographs, so I just picked one that was kind of like the aesthetic, but kind of liked it more. It set a vibe.
Then there's a room by room breakdown with the proposed purchases and the costs.
And then next is all of the mood boards. We create one for each bedroom, living room, dining room, kitchen, and then we also usually include some slides for things like bathroom items, kids items, and outdoor living.
After the mood board, we have a summary totals page where it's a total of all the purchases plus our setup fee, and then we also list out kind of the scope of work of what our setup fee includes.
And our setup is full service. We're including everything from the design plan and proposal to sourcing and purchasing to hauling it all over there, hauling all the trash away, and also photography and listing creation on multiple booking platforms.
These are the primary services. Sometimes we'll get into specifics per project like lighting install, faucets, or other sort of repair or renovation work. So when those kind of things are needed, we'll adjust our setup fee accordingly.
And then finally, there's the approvals page. When we're finished with this proposal, the entire thing gets exported from Canva as a PDF. That gets emailed to the client. We may go back and forth if they have questions or want to switch anything out. Usually it's pretty much go ahead. And then once we get that verbal okay, we'll send them this approvals page for e-signature.
So once the design proposal is approved and we get that first installment of the setup fee, then Kylie goes on a shopping spree.
It's true. It's strange spending like $15,000 to $20,000 in a single sitting, and our credit card usually freaks out after every purchase.
Yeah, as we mentioned, one of the reasons it's much easier for us to use our corporate card versus the client's card is then we can approve those fraud alerts instantly, because there's a lot.
Oh, it's fraud alert for my credit card.
On my design plan spreadsheet, I have a column for a store or website name so that when I am doing the purchasing, I can kind of go down and scan and say, okay, here's everything from Amazon, click through those items, everything from Wayfair or whatever.
Where it's possible, we also like to try and group orders by room. Just makes the invoice for the client easier to understand.
Yeah, so in our final invoice to the client, we are line iteming by order, not necessarily by every single product. So when you get to the description box, if If it has like 30 things in it, it can be a little bit overwhelming on exactly what things were costing. So we can break those purchases down into smaller, more easily understood portions. That's better for everybody.
Items start to arrive within a couple days, and pretty soon our whole entryway is overrun with boxes.
For like a week. How many boxes do we have delivered today?
The Amazon lady the other day said she had 26 boxes for us in one delivery.
At least she wasn't mad. She's like, this is actually great because I unload half my truck for stop.
How many boxes?
Okay, so then we open everything at our house. We check for damages, we're consolidating things, and we're minimizing the amount of trash that we're taking to the property.
Trash disposal from setups is something we'll go over in step 2 next week.
And then once we have a truckload full of stuff, we take it over to the job site.
I usually take a couple loads over before we both go and then really start setting stuff up. But sometimes before then, I'll do things like set up a camera, door lock, or Wi-Fi thermostat, like little sort of maintenance things and smart home additions that I can get going before we start.
That's all for today. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the comment section below, and make sure your notifications are turned on so you don't miss part 2 next week.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.